The topic this week is community structure, and I'm focusing on section 17.3, Keystone Species. When I worked in a daycare years ago, one day a parent searched the room frantically before finding their child's favorite stuffed animal pushed up into the hollow of a piece of furniture. Seems the misplaced toy caused a lot of drama at bedtime and the next morning for several days until it was found. That missing little toy had an effect on the child, the parents, and even indirectly on the daycare staff. This story leads me into a discussion of keystone species. A keystone is a wedge-shaped stone in the center of an arch that prevents it from falling. Pennsylvania is known as the Keystone State because of its roles supporting independence and its geographic relationship to the 13 colonies. According to our textbook, Smith and Smith define a keystone species as a species whose activities have a significant role in community structure. This concept and term was first used by Dr. Robert Payne in the late 1960s. He conducted experiments in which he removed ochre sea stars that fed on mussels from rocky intertidal zones in Washington. He literally used a crowbar to pry the sea stars off the rock and threw them to the sea. Within a year, in the absence of the sea stars, mussels had taken over and crowded out other competitors. This showed the impact one species can have on an ecosystem. Some examples of keystone species. Brown bears regulate populations of prey, but did you know they also help to incorporate nutrients into riparian ecosystems? After feasting on a nice Pacific salmon, they leave the carcasses inland. What seems like littering actually fertilizes the soil. African elephants balance other species in the community by feeding and, well, just by walking. Elephants are browsers and spend 16 hours a day eating. Now, if you're the largest land animal on Earth, it's understandable if you knock down some trees in the process. Vegetation that is preferred by other animals grow in the spaces. Bees, hummingbirds, and some bats are pollinators. Their absence can affect all species that depend on plants, including us. 3/4 of the world's food crops depend on pollinators. Corals create new habitat and can provide shelter for hundreds of species of fish and invertebrates. The white-tailed deer, Pennsylvania's state mammal, is a keystone species because of their ability to reduce populations of other species. By selective browsing, deer eliminate habitat. Due to removal of large carnivores, Pennsylvania deer herds are out of balance. You may look at a forest and see some trees and a lush carpet of ferns and think, this is green, this is a healthy ecosystem. But actually, the deer have reduced the forest understory to a few species that they don't eat and aren't good habitat for birds, such as songbirds and wild turkeys, as well as other animals. Recent efforts to balance deer populations by the Game Commission and the National Park Service in Valley Forge National Park have helped improve habitats. I hope these examples illustrate how a keystone species' presence and absence has a role in community structure.